A Diverse Life, the podcast in which we explore life in all its diversity. Hello and welcome to A Diverse Life number 6. I'm here with Richard. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
And today I'm going to be asking Richard some questions. If you tuned in last week, you'll remember that Richard was asking me some questions about my work and my experiences. And today I'm going to be interviewing Richard, and we're going to be talking about awkward questions. So imagine, if you will, that I am not the open-minded individual that you are normally used to listening to, and in fact I'm quite ignorant and forthright and kind of say whatever comes into my head. And imagine that Richard and I have happened to get in a lift together, and we're stuck in the lift. The lift stopped moving, and so I start to converse with Richard, who is sitting in the lift with me in his wheelchair. So, mate, what's wrong with you? What happened to you?
So I was born about 3 months premature, so I have cerebral palsy.
Oh, right. Cerebral palsy. Oh. Would that get any worse then?
No, that's a common misconception with cerebral palsy. So essentially what happened is, because I was born about three or 4 months early and only weighed about 2 pounds, my sort of body and legs and everything weren't quite ready. It was a bit like taking your dinner out of the oven sort of 10 minutes early when you could have just done with a little longer. So it doesn't necessarily get any worse once you've sort of grown and your bones and your muscle structure is as big as it's going to get. So once you sort of hit your teenage years, you've probably got a much better understanding of exactly how it's going to impact you and what your level of movement might be.
Right. Oh, God. Oh, God, you poor thing. That must be horrible. You know, it must be quite lonely.
Not really. I think because you've never known any different. So I was born with my disability. I've always had it, and always known that I always will have it. So I think for me, there's just been a level of acceptance and a level of knowledge that says, this is me. This is what I'm going to be. So I've just sort of got on with it and made the best of it, and gone to university, had a social life, done all the things that people normally do. I just do it with a disability.
Right. Oh, okay. Right. Well, I mean, God, I tell you what, though, it must be hard. I mean, I can see your legs. They obviously don't work properly, do they? So, I mean, does everything else down there, work? I mean, what about sex and stuff?
Yeah, people are fascinated by that. I've never understood why that's so fascinating, or why people think it's okay to ask.
Oh, no offence. I was just interested. That's all.
Yeah, no. Everything works as it should. Thanks very much.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Well, have you got a girlfriend then?
Well, I'm married and have a child.
You got a child?
Yeah, we are allowed to have relationships and have children and lead a normal life.
What about looking after? How do you look after your child? I mean, is your wife disabled as well?
No, again, that seems to be a fairly common misconception that, we all marry each other. No, my wife does not have a disability, and in terms of how I look after the child, you learn to adapt and find ways of doing things. You just have to. It's no different to any other new parent. It's a learning process, so you learn what you can manage, and you alter how you might do things, and you find a way of doing it.
Oh, God. Bloody hell, that's amazing. Oh, God, you know what? You are amazing. I can't believe that. I mean, big respect, mate. Bloody hell, that's incredible, that is. You should get a medal or something.
Why do you think that?
Well, getting on with your life, I just think it's amazing what you people do, just incredible.
What's the alternative?
Oh, I don't know. I was only asking. There's no need to take offence. God, bloody hell, you can't say anything these days, can you?
Well, yeah, but why do you think it's okay to ask those personal questions? Would you ask somebody else?
Well, probably not. I don't know. I was just interested, I suppose. Sorry, I mean, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings or anything.
Oh no, I was just curious. If I'd have got in a lift next to you and sort of looked you up and down and ask questions about your sort of background and your physical abilities, and you know whether you had a relationship. You know, how would you have felt?
Well, yeah, I suppose a bit embarrassed, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean we're stuck in this lift together, and now you know there's a bit of an awkward situation, to be honest.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I hope someone comes along quite soon. You know,
I mean, did you have any other questions that you felt you needed to ask?
well, I mean, what about if you need the toilet or something like that? Do you need someone to help you with that?
No, I'm perfectly capable of using a toilet. I mean, if there's an accessible toilet or a disabled toilet, it's a bit easier because there's a bit more room and there's sort of rails to steady your balance. But, you know, using a toilet is a perfectly natural function. We all have to do it.
Yeah, well, I suppose so. I mean, I suppose so. I've obviously got off on the wrong foot here, you know, I suppose does it? I mean, does it annoy you having a disability?
There are times when it's frustrating, you know, if you want to do something quickly, you know, you can't sort of get up and leave the house in 10 minutes. You know, you've got to sort of take a bit longer to do the sort of normal day-to-day activities. But, you know, if you got annoyed with it every single day, you'd never leave the house, you'd never get anything done. So there are times when it's frustrating, but you just have to learn to manage that frustration and just get on with it.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank goodness the lift started moving again. This is my floor.
Oh, okay. Well, it's been lovely to see you.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye. So, Richard, how was that for you?
Probably no more awkward than usual. It always fascinates me, you know, why people think it's okay to ask those questions. And that's kind of why I said, you know, if I'd have started looking you up and down and commenting on your appearance or your background or something that was sort of obvious to me, that people would go, well, you can't do that. That's offensive. That's not appropriate. But there almost seems to be a level of acceptance when it comes to disability that because we're curious, it's okay to ask those questions. And sometimes people can be quite rude. And if you answer one question and think, well, maybe that's, you know, they're satisfied now, I've answered, you know, what's wrong with you, I've given them some background or whatever, sometimes that then leads on to 4 or 5 other questions. But if you turn around to somebody, you know, in the first instance, if they say, look, what's wrong with you? If you turn around straight away and say, I don't really think that's appropriate or I don't want to answer it, you do then get, well, I was only asking. Yes, but, you know, if I was from a different culture or you could see that I was from a different religion, would you have done the same thing? Or if it was, you know, something about the way I was dressed, you know, why do you think it's okay? And they sort of hide behind this, well, I was only asking, I was just curious, I just wanted to know.
Yeah. And I think that, so actually, you know, being the kind of in role and asking those questions, I think that when you challenged me on it, I think I immediately felt embarrassed. And I think it was from that embarrassment that I became defensive, really, in a situation like that, you know. But yeah, it is interesting where does that questioning come from? And some of it's a nosiness, isn't it? I think I felt like I was being nosy, really. We could have talked about anything in that lift. Could have talked about the weather. Could have talked about lifts or anything at all. But, you know, I kind of took the opportunity to grill you, which you wouldn't have done if I wasn't with somebody that had a disability. I mean, I wouldn't have done that anyway, but in that kind of role that I was playing, you know.
But it's quite interesting sometimes where they don't ask, but they do the kind of looking up and down, and you can tell that these questions are going through their mind and that they want to ask,
yeah,
but they've stopped themselves for whatever reason. Yeah. And again, if there were 3 or 4 people in that lift, the scenario becomes quite different because they're very unlikely, if there's 3 or 4 other people, to start that line of questioning. People will generally only do it where they're on their own.
Yeah, and I think, and that's because, again, we would feel ashamed of ourselves if we were in the limelight, as it were, if other people were doing that. Yeah. I suppose there is again, it comes, and we talk about this a lot on this program, don't we? But that unconscious bias, that sort of human nature where we can spot differences. We're always spotting difference, aren't we? And there immediately becomes the thing. So I guess in some ways, I don't want to say that if you're asking questions of somebody who's disabled or asking about their disability, you're being ignorant. But I think also we need to keep in check that part of ourself that wants to do those things. Would you agree?
I think that I think there's two things there. One is it's okay to be curious. We're all curious and would like to know about different things or things that we're not familiar with or we haven't experienced before. But for me, the two sort of things you want to ask yourself before you sort of launch into that line of questioning is, do I really need to know? Will it impact my life? Does it make a difference to me if I know these answers? But also, what questions are appropriate? So I can kind of understand do you mind if I ask, what your disability is or what happened? But when it sort of becomes, can you have a sex life? Do you have children? That's sort of going a little bit further into perhaps not quite appropriate. Your curiosity might sort of, lead you down that path, but it's probably more acceptable to just say, look, I hope you don't mind me asking, but I was really just a bit curious. Do you mind me asking what your condition is or what happened or, what the circumstances are, just because I just sort of wondered. That is sort of unacceptable to a point, but again, maybe by people asking those questions and having that conversation, that's how we sort of break down some of the barriers and some of the sort of assumptions that people make. So in a way that can be quite a powerful conversation. But at the same time, we don't need to then take it that little bit too far. It's a bit like a sort of joke or a dirty joke, a bit of banter or whatever. It can be funny, but it can also cross a line. And I think when you start to ask those slightly more personal questions, you do cross a line, and that becomes very difficult from a sort of individual point of view as to how I deal with that. The response or reaction somebody will get largely depends on my mood to a certain extent. So am I in a sort of just let it go mood? Am I in a mood for sarcasm? Or if you've asked it in a really sort of rude and aggressive way, you might get quite a blunt answer back. So I do try to sort of manage that, because I think if I answered every question like that in an aggressive or a sort of negative way or sort of, got sort of quite defensive, I don't think that helps the conversation about disability. I don't think it would do the sort of stereotype of people with a disability any good. However, there are times when, depending on the circumstances and how the question's asked and the tone that the person uses, that sometimes I'll use the same tone back.
Yeah, okay. So I think that there's some great advice there for people about what to do and thinking about how they respond in those situations when they are curious and where the lines are. I think that's really useful. And I think that kind of brings up to the end. Is there anything else that you'd like to sort of say about that, or any sort of questions you have that you feel we haven't covered? Any questions that people ask you that you feel haven't been covered before we finish up?
No, I think for me, again, the thing to sort of think about is almost reflect it back on yourself and think, okay, how would I feel if somebody was asking me those kind of questions about my life? Or if this was, so the person that's being asked the questions was my partner, my friend, or somebody I knew, how do I think they feel about being asked these questions? And just almost give yourself a little bit of a sense check before you launch into these questions about, do I need to know it? How will it impact the person's feelings? And, if somebody did the same thing to me, how would I react and how would I answer those questions, if I would answer them at all?
Okay, thanks, Richard. That's been really enlightening, if a little awkward at times. So, if you've ever experienced awkwardness such as that, you can get in touch with us at adiverselifepodcast@gmail.com. That's adiverselifepodcast@gmail.com. Also, if you'd like to learn more about the issues highlighted by this show, Richard has some free resources for you, and you can get them on his website by going to www.workplacediversitysolutions.com/podcast. And there's more. If you'd like a free, no-obligation consultation on Skype or telephone with Richard, you can email him info@workplacediversitysolutions.com and just put podcast 6 in the subject line. That's podcast 6. A Diverse Life is a Workplace Diversity Solutions and Face Up Theatre co-production, brought to you today by Ian Pringle and Richard Shakespeare. Thanks for listening.